This really happened to me, and I can trace every beat of it to a date stamped on my calendar and a text saved in my phone. I'm 56, a late career operations executive in Austin, and this was the year my life decided to turn itself inside out. In the glass-walled conference room on the 27th floor of Frostbank Tower, my resignation letter lay under a stone paperweight shaped like the state of Texas, while my boss actually laughed, because I'd just told him I was done after discovering he'd stolen credit for my contract and publicly humiliated me at our all-hands. Around us, the rest of the exec team had gathered for the quarterly closeout. Coffee gone cold, laptops open like little metal clams, the glow of the morning sun bouncing off Lady Bird Lake. He leaned back in his chair, palms up, as if to say, "What are you going to do, Elena?" Everyone stared at the paperweight and then at me, waiting to see whether I would swallow the insult like I always had or make a mess. If you genuinely enjoy our stories, please subscribe to the channel, tell us where you're from, and what time it is right now. It's always fascinating to know how far our story flows. I should tell you how I got here, because nothing looks like a betrayal until you put it beside the trust it shattered. I joined Prismatech, a SaaS company with big federal and healthcare clients, 7 years earlier, when my hair was only half gray and I still believed I had to earn every inch I stood on. Our office overlooked Congress Avenue. I walked to work most mornings from my rented duplex in Travis Heights, stopping for a coffee at Joe's on South Congress, and I liked to get in before the sales bros soaked the air with their cologne and their crushing it small talk. I was VP of Operations, the boring half of a shiny story. I handled vendor contracts, compliance audits, and the canyon of logistics nobody wanted to fall into. My boss, our CEO, was named Tyler Garrison, mid-40s, Patagonia vest, perfectly stubbled, and so confident he mistook attention for authority. He had a knack for stepping into photos taken after the work was done. I didn't hate him at first. I even defended him for too long. He had raised $42 million from a Dallas private equity firm, parked a Tesla Model X in the garage, and talked about velocity like it was a sacrament. But I noticed that when the praise rolled downhill, he stepped sideways to catch it. And when blame tumbled, he ducked. The contract that mattered was with a major system in Houston, Memorial Care's data modernization project, a 7-figure multi-year agreement I'd shepherded through 2 procurement rounds and a tangle of HIPAA requirements. I wrote the compliance playbook, trained their team, and negotiated the service-level penalties. Tyler never set foot in their building until the press photos. During our all-hands at the JW Marriott on East 2nd, he walked on stage and announced that he alone had closed Houston, then flashed slides with his face next to a headline. The room clapped. I felt the sound bouncing inside my ribs like hail. Afterward, as we gathered in that conference room with the big view, he told a joke about how operations people always wanted credit for process. I watched my hands. They were very still. I had learned stillness from my mother, who could multiply calm by 0. "I'm resigning," I said, sliding the letter under the Texas paperweight to keep it from curling. He laughed. It wasn't even cruel at first, just certain. "Elena, don't be dramatic. Have a weekend. Take Barton Springs. You'll change your mind Monday." Our CFO, Jean, cut her eyes toward me, then down at her notebook. A few of the younger managers, smart women who'd come up under me, looked panicked. "I know what you're thinking. Why not hold the line, stay and keep my paycheck?" Because a line had been crossed. He had taken my work. And worse, he'd told a roomful of people that if I wanted credit for doing the job, I was being dramatic. People like him call you dramatic, so the room learns to think your boundaries are just performance. "Put it in writing," I said softly. "You've got it," he said, grinning, pushing his chair back, as if nothing in the world could ever dislodge him from that leather seat. That night, I sat at my kitchen table in Travis Heights with a bowl of Veracruz all-natural tacos going cold and spread out every document I had legitimate access to. Vendor agreements, compliance certifications, the memorialized meeting notes from Houston with my initials on every decision. The city hummed outside. From my porch, I could smell rain baking off the street. Somewhere a neighbor's wind chimes were talking to the night. I am not vindictive by nature, but I am thorough. I remembered my mother again. You don't get even. You get everything correct. The first oddity I found was a pattern of expense reimbursements for a boutique PR firm in Los Angeles that Tyler had engaged without board approval. The retainer was 6 figures. The scope of work was fuzzy. The invoices described executive positioning in national outlets. I felt something hot move through my chest. I cross-checked vendor approvals. No legal review, no compliance review. Just a signature from Tyler and a CC to his personal Gmail. I started a spreadsheet that night with dates, amounts, approvals, and a column labeled questions. I didn't know yet which ones I wanted the answers to. I just knew I wanted a record I could hand to someone who couldn't be laughed at. When I finally tried to sleep, the laughter was still there, like a mosquito in the room. I texted my oldest friend, Maureen, who teaches English at Bowie High. He laughed. She wrote back, "Good. Now he'll never see you coming." On Monday, I returned my badge to HR and carried the last of my desk in a Trader Joe's bag to the parking garage. It was early, the city was pink, and the bats were still hiding under the Congress Avenue Bridge. I might have cried if not for the impulse that shot through me like an electric jolt. Save the team. Tyler could replace me. He couldn't replace the integrity of the people I'd hired and trained. If I left and said nothing, they would serve his myth until it ate them. The suspicion grew teeth that week, not because I went digging inside company systems I no longer had access to. I didn't. But because people began to bring me the things they were afraid to say at work. I got coffee at Paperboy with May, a product manager who had a gift for reading contracts like stories. She told me Tyler had been circulating a memo threatening to cut teams that slowed sales narratives. What does that even mean? I asked. It means he wants to move compliance under sales, May said, so the people who make the promises would also certify that the promises are fine. That was the moment when a line inside me became an iron beam. If he was willing to blur the walls between what we sold and what we could legally deliver, and if he was already signing PR retainers to polish his brand, then we weren't just in the realm of arrogance, we were in the neighborhood of risk that burns companies down. I told May that we would do this right. We would keep everything clean. "You going to sue him?" she asked. "Maybe," I said, "or I'm going to make him wish I had." I retained an employment attorney on West 6th, a woman named Charmaine who wore boots and didn't flinch. I told her everything I could legally tell, the public humiliation, the contract theft, the PR retainer, the memo that smelled like gasoline. She listened, then said, "You're in Texas, Elena. One-party consent on recordings. If you talk to people and they tell you their truth, you can document it. Just don't access anything you're not entitled to. And remember, the board hates liability more than it loves any particular human." That line, one-party consent, wasn't a weapon. It was a way to make a diary that other people would believe. I scheduled coffees and walks. I asked questions I had the right to ask, and I listened. I recorded with my phone in my purse. A sales engineer told me about pre-negotiated press mentions orchestrated by the LA firm. A junior recruiter said Tyler had pressed her to post fake Glassdoor reviews. A DevOps lead showed me a photo of a whiteboard after an executive offsite in Marfa. In the corner, the words facts versus perception were circled with arrows pointing toward perception is reality. By the time the Texas sky turned the color of a bruise over Lake Travis, I had hours of conversations, all legal, all dated. I also had a separate idea that kept me up at night with a sweetness I hadn't felt in years. Start my own shop, build it the right way, and take the clients who cared more about truth than theater. I pulled out a yellow legal pad and wrote a name in the margin, Lantern. A thing you light for yourself and carry into a dark room. My final meeting that week was with Houston. I drove down I-10 and parked in the garage across from their main tower, where the cafeteria serves kolaches better than they have any right to be. The VP of IT security, a practical man named Avery with a fondness for black coffee, shook my hand and said, "We wondered when you'd call." I told him I'd left Prismatech. He didn't look surprised. He waited. I waited. In games of chicken, I am patient to a fault. "We like results," he said at last. "We do not like headlines." I told him I understood, and that if he wanted an ops partner who would never put perception above facts, I had a plan. His eyebrows lifted just enough to count as curiosity. "You're leaving us with Tyler," he said. "For now," I said, "but not for long." We stood at the window, looking down at a city of concrete and heat shimmer. "You didn't come to blow a whistle, did you?" he said quietly. "You came to build something." I nodded. I had never felt so alive or so alone. You can probably guess the first trap I set. It wasn't a gotcha. It was a test. I drafted a letter, calm and formal, to Prismatech's board of directors, 5 people, including the Dallas PE partner and a former CFO of a publicly traded healthcare company in San Antonio. I congratulated them on our Houston win and attached housekeeping questions about the PR retainer, approval pathways, and the memo about moving compliance under sales. I copied Charmaine, my attorney, and I sent a courtesy blind copy to Avery in Houston so he would never be surprised by a headline with his name in it. Then I waited. The reply came not from the board, but from an outside counsel in Houston who had never spoken to me before. "Ms. Montoya, we have received your correspondence. Please be advised that all proprietary information remains the property of Prismatech." It was a throat-clearing email, a "how dare you" in legal. I responded through Charmaine, "My client is not in possession of any proprietary data and has respected all obligations. She seeks clarity on governance questions of public import." Every letter was a steady breath. 24 hours later, I got a text from Jean, our CFO. It was a photo. Tyler in a bar on West 6th, smiling with 2 sales guys, a tequila shot midair. The caption, "He thinks this is nothing." Good. Let him think that. I formed Lantern Ledger, LLC the next day through the Texas Secretary of State, the website where 1,000 small dreams go to become tax liabilities, and opened a business checking account at Frost Bank because symbolism is delicious. I knew how to price services. I knew how to hire quietly. I called 3 of the best people I'd ever worked with: May, the product manager; Ray, an implementation lead who could coax order from chaos; and Tanya, a compliance analyst who treated the HIPAA privacy rule like it was scripture. I offered them market rates with profit sharing, fully remote work, and a rule: no spin. We deliver reality, we document reality, and we will walk away from any client who wants pretty lies. Before we posted a single thing on LinkedIn, I wrote a letter to Houston on Lantern letterhead, outlining a plan to separate operations from perception. We charge a monthly retainer. You get out-of-cycle audits and controls that don't make front-page news. No vanity PR, no hero founders. You'll know our names because we'll show up, not because we'll demand them on a slide. Avery called within an hour. "We'll do a 6-month pilot," he said. "I want to see you put Tyler's nose out of joint." I told him I wanted to keep his hospital out of the paper. The first week we were technically alive, my inbox filled with quiet messages from engineers, nurses we'd trained, IT managers from Dallas, San Antonio, and a system in Phoenix that had toured our Austin office once and left impressed. "Do you take small clients? We'd love an assessment. Can you run our annual risk training? Can you look at our BAAs?" The beautiful thing about truth is how hungry the world is for it when it's tired of being sold. Tyler didn't see it. He still thought the show was on the stage, because that's where the cameras are. He didn't see the audience leaving to stand in the hallway with someone who could answer their questions without a microphone. When the board finally responded to my governance questions, it was with a polite note that they were reviewing existing vendor relationships. The phrase felt like a curtain twitching before a change of scene. 2 days later, An item broke in the Austin American-Statesman's business section, a short column about how Prismatech had engaged an LA boutique firm specializing in executive thought leadership. The story didn't mention me. It mentioned the six-figure retainer and the lack of board approval. It also mentioned that the firm had been placing Tyler's bylines in industry publications without disclosing ghostwriting. No company likes that smell. Investors like it least. The next morning, the Dallas partner on our board requested a meeting with me at the Driscoll. He sat in the lobby under a chandelier, reading Texas Monthly and not quite smiling. "You're very good at operations," he said, "and at writing letters." I told him I was better at building companies that don't require letters. He studied my face like it was a term sheet. "Tyler makes noise, Moabshal," he said. "Noise had its uses when we needed attention. Now we need less noise." "Now you need numbers and a story that matches them," I said. "You also need a leader who knows that moving compliance under sales is what you do when you want the Attorney General to know your name." He winced. "We're exploring a change," he said finally. "But there are egos and there are headlines." I nodded. "I can help you minimize both." He asked what I wanted. I told him. A 1-year operating agreement to stabilize Prismatech through Lantern, with hiring autonomy, control over vendor approvals, and a covenant that compliance reported directly to the board. And if we met 3 milestones, client retention, audit pass rate, revenue from non-vanity projects, they would appoint a new CEO. He didn't ask who. He didn't need to. He just needed to know if I could do in 6 months what Tyler had only told stories about. The war started in kitchens and stairwells, the places where people tell the truth. I kept a notebook of names and promises. I recorded only what I was legally allowed to record. I never set foot where I wasn't invited, but I was everywhere now because Lantern was on the phone, in the docks, in the board's dreams about a boring quarter with no scandals. Tyler tried to counter with a road show. He liked hotel ballrooms and spotlights, but the rooms grew thinner. He tried to run a "we're not mad, we're just disappointed" speech in a Slack AMA, but May's replacement posted the memo about moving compliance and the comments filled with polite insurrections. He tried to call me. I let it ring. There are conversations you don't have, not because you're afraid of the person, but because you're protecting the plan. The plan was simple: prove reliability, make a boring story big enough to drown his noise, and then reveal, at the right hour, that the board had already chosen the person to carry the lantern. I could tell you that the revenge felt like fire. It didn't. It felt like gravity returning to a room where everyone had been holding their breath upside down. But I'm getting ahead of myself. The first milestone was an audit. Travis County's hospital district pushed a surprise controls check on Prismatech, and we passed because Tanya had redesigned the process maps in 2 days, and Ray had trained their team across 3 time zones like a field medic. The second was client retention. Houston renewed at a slight markup, with a clause that compliance stayed walled from sales. The third was small but monumental. 0 press for 90 days, except a technical case study about database migration. No quotes from Tyler, no hero shots, just work. In week 13, the board called an extraordinary meeting at the Omni downtown. I arrived in a navy suit I'd sworn off wearing, but sometimes you dress like the building you plan to occupy. The Dallas partner opened with a sigh that sounded like an era ending. "We appreciate your service," he said to Tyler, who wasn't present. He'd been told to join later, for the part where they blamed the market. We went through the motions in a circle of upholstered chairs, while the air conditioning roared. Then he turned to me. "We'd like to begin a search," he said. "An external firm will—" "No," I said. "You'll lose 6 months. Your customers will smell uncertainty. Your team will stall. You have a CEO." "Who?" one director asked, as if he hadn't called and told me to be patient 2 weeks earlier. "You're looking at her," I said. "I'll accept under conditions. Lantern remains separate. I stay CEO of Lantern. We sign a services agreement that keeps conflict walls intact." I'll serve as CEO of Prismatech on a 1-year contract with the power to unwind the nonsense you've allowed to grow here. And we tell the truth. You didn't choose me because I'm a woman or because you like my hair or my patience. You chose me because I have command of the work. Silence has weight. In a room like that, you can feel it shift like a boat leaving the dock. Finally, the former public company CFO said, "It would be unconventional." Conventional got you ghost-written bylines and a compliance memo that could have invited federal attention, I said. Unconventional is how you avoid becoming a headline. The Dallas partner smiled for the first time that day. "We'll draft language," he said, which is the board equivalent of a yes. They asked me to stay while they called Tyler in to discuss transition. I stood, smoothed my jacket, and said I would be at the end of the hall. I didn't need to see the moment he realized the room was no longer his. I already knew what his laugh sounded like. I didn't need to hear it break. The press release went out 2 days later at 6:45 a.m., scheduled to hit inboxes just before the markets opened in New York. Even though we were private, the cadence impresses people who think in ticks and bells. I was on my porch with a mug of coffee when my phone buzzed with a push alert from the Statesman and then from the Texas Tribune's business feed. Prismatech names Lantern Ledger CEO Elena Montoya as new chief executive. The exact words were a funhouse mirror of the day he laughed. The headline was factual, almost boring, and it knocked the breath out of me anyway, because for the first time in a very long time, a thing I had done in the dark was named in the light without distortion. 3 minutes later, the board's email to staff went out. I didn't read it. I opened my LinkedIn, posted a single paragraph about operations as a craft and the value of teams who tell the truth, and I closed my laptop. I walked to the end of my street, where a neighbor's lemon tree drops fruit into the gravel, and I stood for a long moment listening to birds try out their morning routines as if nothing important had happened. There's more, of course. Revenge is never just the reveal. It's the care you take with the aftermath so you don't become the thing you fought. My first week in the corner office, the one I'd avoided all those years because Tyler's cologne seemed baked into the carpet, smelled like new paint. I brought in a small plant from home, a jade with thick glossy leaves, and set it by the window overlooking the Capitol. I moved the compliance team into space with a direct line to the board. I killed the LAPR contract with a letter so clean it squeaked when you read it. I instituted a hiring freeze on any job with the word growth in the title until we could prove our churn wasn't self-inflicted. I sat with engineers and asked them to tell me where the bodies were buried, and then I did the unthinkable for a modern CEO. I took the blame for things I hadn't done because if you want a team to own their work, you have to show them how to own the mess without fear. Tyler tried to fight in small ways. He had a couple of loyalists on sales who whispered that I was overstepping, that I'd turn Prismatech into a compliance shop where fun goes to die. I scheduled a town hall in our all-hands space, the same one where he'd taken my work. I wore jeans and a white shirt, the uniform of 1,000 TED Talks, and told them exactly what we were doing and why. "We tell the truth here," I said. "It saves money, it attracts good clients, and it lets you sleep." Then I made a joke about fun, because fun isn't the enemy. Deceit is. People laughed softly, the way a room laughs when it realizes it's safe to. The Dallas partner called one afternoon to ask if I wanted to do a sit-down with Bloomberg. "Say no," I said, "but send them our CTO. Let him tell the story about our uptime. People who make things deserve to talk about them." He laughed. Not like Tyler laughed, more like relief. Meanwhile, Lantern continued to grow. Our contract with Houston expanded. A system in Phoenix came on board. A smaller clinic in Waco asked for training materials, and Tanya wrote modules so decently human that nurses sent her thank you emails. We documented every firewall between Lantern and Prismatech and published the docs internally because sunlight makes nothing grow in the wrong places. On a Friday evening, when downtown smelled like dry heat and beer, I found myself alone in the Prismatech office, long after everyone had left. I stood in the conference room and ran my fingers over the imprint in the walnut table where the Texas-shaped paperweight had sat the day I resigned. The mark was faint, more of a dent in my memory than in the wood. I clicked off the lights and left. I wish I could tell you the story ended with a dramatic perp walk or a lawsuit that cut clean. Life rarely shapes itself like television. Tyler didn't go to jail. He didn't disappear. He did what men like him do. He took a sabbatical to spend time with family, posted photos of a hike in Big Bend, and quietly began advising a podcast startup. A year later, a profile mentioned that he'd learned hard lessons about culture. I didn't slam my laptop or rage. I poured a glass of water and took a walk while the sun folded itself into the horizon. Real revenge is not the wound you make in someone else. It's the wound you heal in yourself and the safety you build in the place where their story used to be the only one anyone listened to. 2 weeks after the press release, I went to the Travis County Civil and Family Courts facility, not because I had a case pending, but because Jean had asked me to meet her there. She'd filed a quiet complaint about the PR retainer months earlier and wanted me to see the stamped page where the board had acknowledged responsibility in a sealed letter of reprimand. "I kept a copy," she said softly, "not because I want to hurt him, because I want to remember you can make a system listen if you speak its language." We got breakfast tacos from a truck on 11th and ate on a low wall like teenagers. A breeze lifted napkins and the smell of cilantro. "You know he'll say you only got this because you were angry," she said. I smiled. "Then the lesson is, don't make older women angry." We laugh, we older women. We laugh because we finally understand the joke and we're not in it anymore. Months passed. I renegotiated vendor terms. I gave 5 promotions to women who'd been stuck under ceilings made of tone. I instituted a policy that every meeting had a chair and a recorder, and that the recorder rotated. No one would ever have to beg for credit again. On the anniversary of the day Tyler laughed, I pulled the Stone, Texas paperweight out of my drawer at home. I'd asked facilities where it went, and they'd shrugged. I found it on a shelf under a pile of branded water bottles, unclaimed history-gathering dust. I took it home because I like useful things. It sits on my kitchen table now, holding down receipts, the shape of the state comforting and heavy. Sometimes at night, when the cicadas whine, I run my thumb along its edge and think of the conference room where everyone held their breath, waiting to see if I would break. The last surprise came from Houston, because of course it did. Avery called, his voice softer than usual. "I thought you'd want to know before you read it," he said. "We're issuing a statement tomorrow recognizing Lantern's role in stabilizing Prismatech's operations and our appreciation for your leadership in fighting for boring, unsexy truth." I laughed so hard I scared my cat off the counter. "Avery," I said, catching my breath, "you can't say unsexy in a press release." He said, "Watch us." The statement ran. It was plain. It was lovely. It said my name exactly once and described a set of behaviors and outcomes that made every operations person I'd ever known nod. My mother would have clipped it and put it on the fridge with a magnet shaped like a chili pepper. And here's the part that might be the most important if you're listening in some other kitchen with your own paperweight and your own laugh ringing in your ears. I didn't get everything I wanted. I got everything correct. The difference matters more than I ever knew. Sometimes I see Tyler at events. Austin is small, standing with a drink and the look of a man who wants to be found impressive. He always smiles like we're in on something. I always smile back like we aren't. He never references the day he laughed. No one does. They don't have to. The headline did it for us. Simple as a ledger, exact as a clock. I still run Lantern. We're still boring. We still grow, one contract at a time, one clean audit, one nurse who doesn't have to learn a new password because some executive wanted to innovate by changing a system that worked. Prismatech thrums along like a machine in a basement, essential, unphotographed, cooling a building full of people who never think about the mechanism because it hums. On weekends, I walk down South Congress and watch the tourists line up for photos with the I Love You So Much mural. I drink coffee, I listen to the music falling out of doors, and I am not young. I am not new. But I am the kind of woman who knows where every bolt goes and how to find the one that rattles. The city looks different when you stop searching for a stage and start loving the scaffolding. My favorite moment in all of this didn't make the paper. It happened on a weekday afternoon in a tiny conference room where the frosting on the glass had peeled away in one corner so that light knifed in. Tanya presented a checklist nobody asked her to build. May corrected a sentence I'd written and improved it. Ray sketched a timeline on a whiteboard and then erased it because the right plan changes as you learn. I sat in the corner and thought, this is what you carry a lantern for. To see this again and again without asking it to be shinier than it is. As I left that room, my phone buzzed with a news alert I almost ignored. Another company in town had announced a flashy hire from Los Angeles. I smiled. The city loves its noise. I walked past the large conference room, the place of the laugh, the paperweight, the piece of myself I left behind, and I let the door swing shut without a sound. I stood in the hallway for a breath longer than I needed to, not to savor victory, but to stack the moment in my mind like a clean plate on a shelf. This really happened. It doesn't feel like fireworks. It feels like turning a key in a quiet house and hearing the hum, knowing the lights work because you rewired them and labeled every breaker, and if one trips in the night, you can find it in the dark. And if you find yourself someday in a room where someone laughs at you like they own the story, I hope you remember a middle-aged woman in Austin who picked up a paperweight, pressed down on her name until it lay flat and visible, and didn't make a scene until it was time to build one that would last, longer than anybody's laugh. The end.